Hello and welcome to the Bookcast Club, a podcast for book lovers. I'm Jenny, coming to you from Norwich in the UK, and I'm with my lovely co-host Chris, who is currently in Indianapolis, right?
I am. Yes,
soon
indeed.
to be in London.
Yes. Just a few days.
Yeah, very exciting. But today we are discussing the wonderful Women's Prize. Chris and I have, between us, read the shortlist. I think we both almost managed the whole thing.
Yeah.
But it turns out they are announcing the winner on the 14th of this month, not at the end of the month. So that was 2 weeks, knocked off our reading time straight away. But yes, between us, we have got all bases covered. But before we make a start on the Women's Prize, I was quickly gonna just drop a few things in right at the start so that people listen, because sometimes I think they reach our ad break and probably just switch off, which is what I think we do when we read it, so it's fine. I just wanted to quickly mention that our Patreon, you can now have a free trial of our bonus episode tier. So they have opened up 7-day free trials.
Oh, nice.
And we've chosen to do that with our bonus episode tier. So if anybody wants to just give our Patreon a go, if you really want to just blast through the bonus episodes and then cancel before your trial ends, then that is absolutely fine. But yeah, it is open for you to have a free trial now.
I would really recommend it because there are actually a few bonus episodes that I think are, like, not to toot our own horns, but like I have listened back and been like, I'm almost a little disappointed they couldn't be on the main pod because they were really good. And like one of my favorite ones we did that I think like people would really like is our Annihilation episode.
Yes. No, I agree.
That was one of the most most amount of fun I have had recording a podcast was that Annihilation episode. And like I think we both just had so much to say and discuss, and like it was just a fantastic time.
Yeah, it was fun. And it is, our Patreon is kind of where we get to experiment a little bit with episodes. Like we did a board games. What did we do? Like board games that reminded us of books.
Yes,
it was loose,
something like that. Yeah, that was a long time ago.
It was. And yeah, we're just a bit more experimental there. And we also do episodes that are a little bit more like reading wrap-ups and that kind of thing. And if you want to hear us being snarky, would marginally more so in those
I definitely
episodes.
have more attitude on
Chris just goes for it wherever. But...
Yeah.
So yeah, that's our Patreon. Give it a go. Have a free trial. I would just like more people, like you say, Chris, to listen to those bonus episodes. So we will not be offended if you free trial it and then stop. It's absolutely fine. Go for
Not
it.
at all.
The other thing I wanted to mention is that this might mean absolutely nothing to you or anybody else out there, Chris, but I have moved our newsletter over to Substack, which is all the rage at the moment. If you're on our newsletter list, it'll just come into your email like it usually would. However, Substack lends itself to, it almost gives you like a web page, and each email that you write, there's also like a comment section underneath. So it's just another way of us being able to speak to you guys, basically. So I've moved us to Substack so that we can hopefully talk to more of you out there listening. So those are the two things I wanted to plug right at the start, and you can ignore our ad break as usual now. So moving on to the shortlist of the Women's Prize. We're going to go through each of them and share our thoughts, but the 6 finalists are Black Butterflies by Priscilla Morris, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, Fire Rush by Jacqueline Crooks, The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell, Pod by Lillian Paul, and Trespasses by Louise Kennedy. Now, before we dive into the individual books, I know, Chris, that you read quite a lot off the long list. Are there any on that long list that you read that you're surprised haven't made it onto the shortlist?
Yeah, I was really trying hard to try and read the ones that I thought would make the shortlist. That way it
Me
would make my
too, and
life
I
easier when
failed.
yeah, completely failed. So I read Cursed Bread. I DNF'd Glory by No Violet Bulawayo. I read Homesick by Jennifer Croft. I read Memphis by Tara M. Stringfellow. I DNF'd Stoneblind by Natalie Haynes. And I read Wandering Souls by Cecile Pinn. And I am surprised. I would say the two that I would have really liked to have seen on there would have been Cursed Bread by Sophie McIntosh, which I thought was a brilliant book. And then also, I would have really liked to have seen Wandering Souls on there because I thought that was a really emotional book that was very slight and yet accomplished so much and managed to wear its heart on its sleeve without being saccharine or overly sentimental. And I just thought it was a very impressive debut, and I think it would have been really nice to see that make the shortlist. I really enjoyed Homesick by Jennifer Croft, but I'm not surprised that it didn't make the shortlist because it's much more experimental. It's much more slippery than kind of the rest of the books are, and I think that the Women's Prize, it borders that kind of commercial literary thing quite a bit. And I think that they try and go for a book that you could kind of put into the hands of anybody. And as much as I really enjoyed Homesick, and it was exciting, I think, to read a book that was being so playful in its form, I'm not surprised it didn't make the shortlist, given what it was doing. And I'm really hoping it gets recognized by the Booker. Same with Cursed Bread. I think that Cursed Bread is kind of a shocking, deliciously dark, sexy novel that I think will get its shine from the Booker Prize, where it maybe didn't on the women's.
Yeah, those two. I think, were you talking about Homesick in the pod episode that you did with Sarah? I'm sure it was you two talking about it. And yeah, you both maybe want to read it. So yeah, there's a couple that I'm surprised. No, not surprised it didn't make it, but like you, I tried to read some that I thought would make the shortlist. In which case I should have just gone for the Barbara Kingsolver and the Maggie O'Farrell because I knew I should have just made a start. But I, like you, I DNF'd Glory, but I DNF'd it because the shortlist came out and I needed to crack on, and unfortunately it hadn't made it. I don't think I'll return to it, and that's not because I didn't think it was good. I did. I thought it was, and we'll talk about the other animal book on this list. I thought it was a far, far, far superior book to the animal book that got shortlisted. So I thought it was very funny in places. However, I agreed with you, and again, I think it was in that pod episode where you said it could have been so much shorter. It is very repetitive.
Extremely repetitive. If I had to read the line, "Je le da" with a da and another da one more time, I was really gonna lose my mind. It was one of those books that I got halfway through, and I literally thought to myself, I get it.
Yeah,
I get the point. And I really felt like there was no way she had something else to say in the book, because surely she would have said it through the 200 pages of meandering repetition that I had already read if she had something else to say. Yeah. And so I really felt like no compunctions at all about DNFing it, because I was like, I got it. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you kind of get what she's doing and get obviously how she's trying to convey the story. And at that point, you probably just go on Wikipedia.
I felt very much the same way. Very much the same way. There were definitely some lines in there that were very funny. Like
there's
even
a bit
just the
where
opening...
there's a bit where the chicken gets stressed out and poops out a fried egg, which I thought was hilarious.
That was very funny. And there was also a funny bit kind of at the beginning where like these, I think it was cows, like go up in the middle of the speech, and like they're these supposed to be feminists, and they're like exposing their breasts on as a protest and stuff like that. So there's some very funny humorous imagery and stuff like that with political satire. So I don't want to like slag it because I don't think it's like terrible or anything. It was way too long and repetitive.
Yeah, it was too long and repetitive, and I would have finished it, and I probably would have given it 4 stars. So I do think it's a good book. However, now that I've not read it for a month, I'm not going to go back and finish it.
Yeah,
so
same.
There was that one, and I started I Am a Fan. Is that?
Yeah, that one's not out here in the US yet, but as soon as it comes out, I'm getting it.
It's short, and again I
Yeah.
stopped because it wasn't shortlisted. I thought it was going to be. Whether I'll go back to it, I don't know. I think tonally I wasn't massively into it, so
Yeah.
probably not.
I'm really interested in Children of Paradise by Camila
Yes,
Cordova.
I own that one.
So I read her short story collection when it came out years ago, The Doll's Alphabet, which
Oh, is that
was
her?
yes, the
Ah,
one that was
okay.
like published by Fitzcarraldo, I think,
Mm.
and then I think it was published by Coffee House Press here in the U.S. And it was a very exciting short story collection. The titular story is very controversial, I think, kind of from not because there's anything in the story that's controversial itself, but it's literally one sentence, and it's not a story. I mean, it's just not like. I mean, we can argue about whether or not it's artistic or not, but I remember it caused like quite a stir because like some people were like, "This is not a story. What is this?"
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I still remember the sentence. It was the doll's alphabet only has I think 12 letters or something like that, and then it just listed the letters.
Oh, okay. I think I might own this book.
Yeah. Um, and so anyway, but I really liked the collection. It's very kind of macabre and kind of similar to Angela Carter, fabulous kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I am really intrigued by Children of Paradise, but it doesn't come out in the U.S. I think till later this year.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah, I've got it in my Kindle. It's another really short one, so I think I will. I will definitely read that one.
I could just buy these while I'm in London. What am I thinking?
Yes, Chris. I need to make a list of the bookshops you need to go to.
Exactly.
I will do that.
So yeah, but yeah, definitely Children of Paradise is definitely the one that like I didn't get to read because it's not available, and it's the one that I'm most intrigued by that I haven't been able to get my hands on.
So, should we dive in?
Shall we? Yeah, I say we dive in.
I've gone alphabetically.
Juicy opinions.
Yeah, I've gone alphabetically. So the first one on the list is Black Butterflies by Priscilla Morris. So I don't think I've been fair on this book because I started it the night before last and I finished it this afternoon.
Okay.
It isn't very long, and I listened to it and read it. So I wanted to make sure that, because when I listen to audiobooks, sometimes I can't get a sense of what the writing style is actually like. So I wanted to make sure that I did both. I'll tell you what it's about. That'd be useful. So it's set in Sarajevo in the 90s, and we follow this lady Zora, who's an artist and a teacher, who has decided to stay in a city torn apart by civil war. Her husband and her elderly mother and her daughter have left to escape to England, and she's decided to stay. I can't quite remember if there was a significant reason why she did. I think it's more to do with her job and that she's an art teacher and she doesn't want to abandon her students or their homes, because when their homes are left empty, then refugees are allowed to just go into the homes and live in them, essentially, if flats and stuff are empty. So she's decided to stay. The violence and hostilities increase significantly in a very short period of time. So very quickly Zora is in quite a lot of danger, and the city and her life and everything's slowly being shut off. So electricity goes down, water goes down, they're getting completely isolated from the world outside, and you basically just follow that period of her life, and it focuses quite a lot on the friendship she has with the neighbours in her tower block, and I loved it. So I thought it was brilliant. I would like to reread it because I don't feel like reading it in 2 days. I just don't do that with books. So the fact that I read it so quickly just to get it fitted in, I feel a bit bad, but I would like to go back because I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was beautiful. The writing's really beautiful. I don't know if it's a debut novel actually. I'll have to check, but it's a civil war in European history that I don't know much about, and I should know more. And it feels really timely because obviously the war in Ukraine and the fact that millions of people had to just leave, and some will have decided to stay, and seeing how that plays out in a war in quite recent history, although not a civil war, is really interesting. And I'm not really usually into books that involve art, I have to say. I usually groan quite a lot when I realise a book is going to focus in on like art, but there's something about the loss of art and the loss of at one point the town hall is bombed, and it's where she works as an artist and as a teacher, and they obviously have libraries there and stuff, and Black Butterflies comes from the fact that the books are all burning, and what's falling down is pages of books that look like burnt butterflies basically. And yeah, it's just really beautiful, and it's sad, and I thought my only criticism of it is too short. I would love to have seen it fleshed out a little bit more, but in terms of getting a sense of the brutality, but also the bonds that are created during a time of war, I thought it was really, really good. And the fact that she did that in such a short time frame, yeah, I loved it.
Oh wow, I'm a little surprised. I had heard so many mixed reactions to this book that I was kind of expecting you to not like it, but I'm really glad you did because it's made me more excited for it.
Oh, cool. What's the negative stuff you've heard?
I've heard some people say that the metaphors in it are a bit ham-fisted. I've heard some people say that it's a little much, but like everyone's different. So like, I haven't heard anybody like really say, "Oh, the writing is really bad" or anything like that. I've just heard kind of mixed things. So I didn't know where you were going to land, but I'm really excited that you really loved it.
Yeah, I really liked it. I mean, I guess some of the criticism there can stem from the fact that it is too short. So it's just feels not surface level, because that's not fair, but she just can't. It's not like this rich, big, epic story, because in reality it's a 6-hour audiobook, so it's not. Yeah, it's not a long book. So yeah, I get it, but equally I really, really enjoyed it.
I don't have the sheet in front of us, so I can't remember what's next alphabetically.
Alphabetically, next is Demon Copperhead.
Demon Copperhead, yes. I would say, if I think the favorite to win from probably people who are following the prize, Barbara Kingsolver has won in the past. Did she win for the Lacuna? Maybe I can't remember
That
what
rings
she
a bell,
won for.
but was that the Booker?
I can't remember. I know she has definitely won the women's prize before, because basically if either Maggie O'Farrell or Barbara Kingsolver win, then it'll be the first 2-time winner of the women's prize ever. So there's a lot of excitement. So this book is Barbara Kingsolver's use of David Copperfield to examine poverty and drug addiction in America. It follows the main character, Demon Copperhead, who is really born Damon. He gets the nickname Demon Copperhead, and it sticks when he is young. He is born to a mother who is in and out of rehab. She's addicted to drugs. She's addicted to alcohol. She marries an abusive stepfather who does not get along with Demon, and she eventually, unfortunately, dies of her addiction. He is then set through the foster system, the U.S. foster system, where he travels from foster home to foster home, each kind of more Dickensian than the last, where he is introduced to the kind of seedy things of poverty, drugs, alcohol. He eventually finds a home in the house of a football coach of the big star football team. He makes a name for himself as a football player, but his high school football career is cut short very quickly when he is injured, and his injury leads to him being addicted to opioids. And this book follows him as he tries to climb out of this constant hole that he has been dug into. It's told in first person. You get hints that maybe he's, from the very beginning of the book, that he's writing his story down as a means of helping him recover from drug addiction, but you're not quite sure where he is at in this recovery process from the beginning. And so it's really told with his voice. His voice is really the center stage of the book. More, I would say, than the characters, more than the setting. It is his voice in his head that really kind of takes the center stage, for better and for worse, in my opinion, because I think there are times when his voice really sings, and I think there are times when Barbara Kingsolver is trying a little too hard to convince me of the authenticity of a teenager in the 1990s. There was a bit very much towards the beginning of the book that really put me off, where he said something about like somebody being as useless as finding dried semen on the carpet, and I was like, oh yeah, I don't think anyone would ever actually say that, but okay. So I don't think this book is like perfect, right? Like I think that Barbara Kingsolver makes missteps. Like I'm not one of those people that's like, this book is clearly the book that should win every single book prize, blah 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 blah. That being said, it's really technically astute. Like, there is a real surety and power to the writing that's difficult to deny. I think it's difficult to walk away from this book without being impressed by its scope and ambition and its willingness to bear the author's emotions on its sleeve. Barbara Kingsolver is not subtle at all. She has an agenda. There are points when you feel like she is here to preach at you, and yet I wasn't too bothered by that, right? Like, you kind of have this warring kind of constantly as you're reading, where you can kind of recognize things that maybe would annoy you if a different, less skilled author was doing it, but don't seem to annoy me in the book. And it's very powerful. There's some really upsetting stuff, some stuff that really touched me as I was reading it. I don't come from Appalachia, but I come from I come from a town that's very much been destroyed by the opioid crisis. And so it was very powerful to read. I mean, like, my very first job that I ever had, the girl that was working with me, we used to work the drive-thru together every day. And she was 15 years old working the drive-thru, and she was so addicted to heroin that she was going through withdrawals with me every single day, and I would have to like kind of keep her hidden from management because I didn't want people like finding out she was getting sick in the back. And that was very common. I mean, that was everywhere I worked. It was like that. And so, like, I don't know, the book really spoke to me, and I was very pleased with it.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think this is me just being naive, but it's not something that we come across in the UK. Like, in your everyday life, you wouldn't come across somebody that's addicted to heroin. You wouldn't be working with somebody that is withdrawing from heroin, having to support them in that way. It's just, I'm not saying it's the norm with you, but it's just not something you would come across. Yes, of course there's drugs and of course there's addiction, but it's not as widespread and as common an issue as it obviously is in certain parts of the state. So it's it was quite an interesting topic to read about, really. I really enjoyed it. She's masterful at just writing like an epic character-based novel, because at no point did I get bored of Demon. At no point did I think, oh my god, I just need to put this book on double speed and get it over and done with. I just was loving being in his world and in his head, and I thought it was great. I think it's going to win is my opinion, and I think it's a worthy winner. I think it deals with issues that are current in society, and the fact that she's done that by retelling David Copperfield, I just think it kind of ticks all the prize boxes, basically.
And you know what, like, I had never read David Copperfield, and so as I was reading it, I didn't allow myself to really think about like how closely is this following David Copperfield, because I just wanted to enjoy the story for what it was. And so I didn't look up anything about David Copperfield. And then when I did look up stuff about David Copperfield, I was kind of amazed by how much had been borrowed from David Copperfield, in that it was able to still feel completely believable as its own story.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say? Like, there was never a moment in the book where I thought to myself, oh, that's a plot twist to like try and make this mimic David Copperfield. No, I never felt like that. Even though when you read the David Copperfield summary, it's a very similar sequence of events, even including the kind of more plotty things that are happening towards the end of the book, taking place between the star football coach and his assistant coach, which is very heavily borrowed from David Copperfield, which I would never have guessed. Like reading it, it didn't feel like, oh, this is being lifted from an 18th century plot line from England. You know what I'm saying? So it was just kind of amazing that it felt so
seamless.
Believable. Yeah, exactly. Like it really felt perfectly believable to the time and setting.
Obviously we won't spoil things, but I think there's only one bit, and it was right at the end, and I said, have you read David Copperfield? Like, is there a reason why that's happened? And that's the only time that we then looked up the plot and was like, oh, okay. Otherwise, I thought it was absolutely seamless. I've never read David Copperfield, but I have seen the film with Dev Patel in. Really couldn't remember it though, but I could only really remember that he moves from family to family, and he ultimately ends up becoming, I think, a famous writer. So yeah, those are the only similarities that I could even remember. It's a good film. I don't know why I haven't remembered it.
There was a part of this book that I think and then we can quit focusing on this because I feel like we're spending a little bit too much time, but like it's so good that I have to say some of this stuff. There was a part in this book that like really got to me, which is that there's a bit when his mother has just died and he's visiting friends in Tennessee, and the news that summer is about the Lily-Lid murders, which was the slaughter of a family in Appalachia, and everyone was killed. They were killed by 6 teenagers, and only one member of the family survived, and it was the baby. And I knew about this story growing up quite a bit, and so like when I started reading it, I was like, I can't believe that she's referencing the Lily-Lid murders. Like, this is not like a super famous murder to get referenced. And then what happened though in the Lily-Lid murders is that there was a huge custody battle over this baby between the two sides of the family, and the Norwegian side of the family ended up winning, and it was huge news in Appalachia in the 90s of everyone following what was going to happen to the fate of this baby and taking sides and all this different stuff, right? And he realizes as he's watching this that his whole community is so concerned about what's going to happen to this orphan, even though we know it's going to get adopted by family. Like, we know that no matter what happens in this custody battle taking place, this baby is going to be adopted by people that love it. And yet, nobody seems to pay attention to the thousands of orphans in Appalachia that are being run through the foster system ragged like he is. Mm-hmm. And he has that moment of realization. And the way it is written, I literally was sobbing. Like, I was literally sobbing on the couch because it was so... I don't know. She really captured magic in a bottle with that scene. Like, it really got me.
Yeah, she's
really good.
She's really good. I don't think there's much more to say, is there really?
No.
It's definitely worth your time. Read it is what I'd say. I think it'll win, and I think it will be a deserving winner.
Yeah. It's long. You know, I think maybe the argument can be made that at times it's a little too long. I don't know, but that's
I think it's worth it, and I don't...
Yeah, I think it's worth it. I do think it's worth it. And even the more time I spend away from it, the more I like and appreciate it, and I don't know. It's a book that sits with you.
It reminded me of A Little Life, but not in such a traumatic way.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it,
definitely.
So there you go.
It's less indulgent than A Little Life by far, but yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
I really liked it.
Cool.
Okay. Got that exercise from our system.
Demon, right.
I'm so glad we both really enjoyed that. I was not wanting to fight somebody.
I wasn't gonna read it. I wasn't gonna read it because I saw the size of it and I thought, I'm not gonna read that. And then luckily the audiobook was in my library, so I was like, no, all right then, I will. And I really enjoyed it. Well worth my time. So next, let's discuss Fire Rush by Jacqueline Crooks. So, Fire Rush is about London-born Yamaye, I think you say her name. She lives the weekends in her local underground club called the Crypt, and it's very dub music, features very heavily in this book. It's a big part of her and a big part of her friendships and her ancestry, and whilst enjoying dub music at the weekend, she meets a fella called Moose. It's not a spoiler, this is in the blurb, that his life gets cut short very brutally, and it sends her on a path of drugs and gangs and ultimately retracing her ancestors to Jamaica. I listened to the audio, so it's a very lyrical book. I honestly don't. I think I'd have DNF'd it if I was reading the physical book. It's written in, is it Jamaican patois? I think is how you say it. How you say it. So it lends itself to being listened to. I think any book written in dialect lends itself to being listened to by a narrator who is of that ethnicity and reading it well. Music does play a heavy role in it, and actually the audiobook has music in the background, so there's a lot of lyrics in a song in this book, which I don't know if you reached the bits like that, Chris, that reading the physical version, I cannot read music in physical books. I find it really difficult. I can't just make a tune up. I just read it, which I don't know. I just don't know whether it works personally. So listening to it in audio, where they've obviously come up with like a rhythm for something, works much better. It's very short and snappy. It was weird listening to it because obviously it is read in dialect, but equally, I don't think it's read in dialect all the time. I don't think it's written in dialect all the time. So a lot of her sentence structure just felt really short and punchy, but all the time.
Yes,
it is. And that's quite difficult to get through.
It was difficult to read it. Like, it was, full disclosure, I DNF'd it about halfway through. My issues with it were a few things. One, I felt like the dialogue made no sense, and not because of the patois. I felt like people's responses to things, like the actual emotional responses, what they were saying, I would read like lines of dialogue and be like, I'm not following the logic as to why so-and-so is responding like this to this situation. Like, I'm lost, you know? And it had nothing to do with the Jamaican patois. It just felt clumsy. Like, it felt very rushed, like, while I was reading it. Like, very rushed. Every kind of moment and scene. I also... the book opens up with basically her meeting Moose, then falling in love with Moose, and then Moose being killed. Okay, I don't know how much time takes place for those events, how long she was with Moose, blah, 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 because it's difficult to kind of keep track of time as you're reading the book, because their lives are very repetitive. Their lives are kind of in this drunken, danced out, drugged out haze, so it's a little bit difficult to like figure out how much time is really elapsing. She could have been with Moose for quite a long time before he's killed, but the amount of time you spend with him on the page before he is killed is like 15 pages. Okay, like felt like an actual week. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So like the response that like the love of her life has just been stripped from her feels completely ridiculous when you're reading it. And I think that the book would have been stronger if it had opened up with her and Moose having been in a relationship for 6, 10, 9 months already, instead of having us go through the process of meeting him, falling in love, and then him dying, because it felt like I got to get through this plot. Like, it just felt very amateur. It felt really debut. And yeah, just I could not bring myself to care. The book was making me hate reading, and so I put it down.
I did finish it, however, it was on double speed, and I don't think I could tell you what happened at the end, so technically kind of DNF'd it myself. The other issue I had with it is that I had no sense of place at all. So at one point, she's in Bristol. Other than her saying she was in Bristol, I would have had no idea that that's where she was. I think she mentions the harbour at some point, but yeah, I just didn't. I don't want to shit all over it. It's got good reviews, so
other people seem to be loving it. I'm not one of those people.
I looked on Storygraph today, and I was like, I'm going to have a look and see what the low reviews are for this, and genuinely, there aren't any particularly. So, and the ones that are genuinely people that didn't get on with the language in it, which listen to it. I think it's the way to do it. But yeah, it wasn't for me, and I think listening to it, I knew it wasn't going to be for you either.
You know, reading it was And it was one of those things that, like, the library didn't have the audiobook, and then, like, I was like, well, I could get it on Audible, but then I, like, read 50 pages of it, and I was like, I don't want to waste an Audible credit on something like this. Like, I'm sure the audiobook is more rewarding than the physical book, but it's not going to be rewarding enough for me as a reader, unfortunately. So, yeah, wasn't a massive fan.
No,
Which is a shame,
not a
because
big
I like
fan.
the premise and the idea, and I like the idea of kind of looking at 1970s, 1980s house culture. Like, I mean, that's something that is a big deal in the US, and I didn't know that it had any real history in the UK as well, so that would have been really cool to read about. But yeah, was not for me.
No, I think the plot was messy, and that was the problem with it. I think the author is somebody who obviously knows dub music and knows that
Hmm.
lifestyle. I think she was growing up in that time period, so those were the bits that felt well realized, for
Yes.
like the time she spends DJing and the time she spends in these clubs. But that doesn't lend itself to what was quite an ambitious plot line.
Hmm.
Again, it's short, and I think unfortunately debut authors are often shortened, and that might have happened
Yeah.
as it's been made shorter, and it just the whole, she ends up going to Jamaica to go and go and meet Moose's family, but like research her own ancestry and like look into where her mother might be, and it's done in like literally the last. I mean, did you even reach this bit? Because it's like the
No.
last. No, it's the last quarter of the book, all crammed into probably like 50 pages. It just
Yeah.
didn't. It didn't work, and I think it was a shame. I think it had potential.
Yeah, I agree. It had definitely had the potential to be something I would love, but it just was not, unfortunately. This is where we pop a little ad break in to tell you about all the different ways you can support the podcast, most of which are totally free. A really effective and easy way of showing your support is by rating and reviewing us on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. There is a link in the show notes that will take you straight to the Apple Podcast page where you can write a review. And if you listen on Spotify, you can now very easily give us a star rating. You can also share our posts on social media. We are at Bookcast Club on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. You can sign up to our free monthly newsletter on Substack, where we share even more book recommendations, our pick of the new releases, and all the latest podcast news. But the best way for us to find new listeners is by you telling your book-loving friends and family about us. If you want to support the podcast financially, we do have a Patreon account. You can sign up for as little as £2 a month. We offer early access to the podcast, monthly bonus episodes, and our top tier will get you all of the above and personalized book recommendations. We get you to fill in a survey, and then we tailor our book recommendations to your preferences. We will also send you books in the post. There are over 20 bonus episodes, and you can get instant access to if you sign up as a patron today. We now also offer a 7-day free trial with our bonus tier. The link is in our show notes. But however you choose to support, we as always want to say a huge thank you. We appreciate each and every one of our listeners.
Carrying on. The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. You
My
didn't read this one,
favorite.
did you, Chris?
No. And I feel really bad because I even told you that if it got shortlisted, I would read it. And then it got shortlisted, and I thought, no, I shall never again be compelled to read another sentence by Maggie O'Farrell. Go with God, all who love her, but not me. No, I shan't. Mm-mm.
Well, I did read it. I really enjoyed it.
Did you?
I did
Then I will let
enjoy
you
it.
have the shine.
So, if you don't know, the Marriage Portrait is set in 1561, and we follow Lucrezia and her husband Alfonso, who's a duke, and I can't remember which number duke he is, and I can't remember where he's duke of, but he's a duke. And we know very early on in the book, I think probably in the first chapter, that Lucrezia believes that Alfonso is intent on murdering her. And the book shifts timeline back and forth to show their journey from betrothed through to marriage and her increasingly isolated life in Alfonso's palazzo, which I think is a villa or a castle. It seemed to me like a castle when they kept describing it. We witness Alfonso's increasingly erratic behaviour as the book goes along, and it's all the backdrop of it is her being painted for what is known as a marriage portrait. Yeah, I won't say any more about the plot than that, but I really enjoyed it. And if I like historical fiction, and Maggie O'Farrell, she can tell a good tale. And I think as long as you can lean into her writing, because she's very lyrical, she uses a lot of adjectives and many a sentence to say something very simple. If you can lean into that, then I think you'll enjoy it. But if you don't like Maggie O'Farrell's writing, then it's no less Maggie O'Farrell than any of her other books.
My thing with Maggie O'Farrell is you are correct. She does use a lot of adjectives, which I don't mind. What drives me insane, though, is that she does the same sentence structure over and over and over and over and over again. And once you notice it, it is so aggravating to the point where I almost don't want to say what it is in case you're reading her without having noticed it. But she will have a sentence, and then the sentence will end with 3 adjectives. Always 3. Repeatedly. And it's like, oh my God. Like, it sends me as a reader. Which sounds like a very nitpicky complaint, but when you're actually reading her, it's very,
Yeah, you'll have now ruined her books for like a whole load of other people now who won't be able to not spot that when they're reading. I did take a picture of, it seems very cruel to do this, but I mean, it's Maggie O'Farrell, she doesn't care.
Yeah. I mean, like, she's so successful. People love her, especially in the UK. I don't think she's as big in the US as she is over across the pond, but her books are selling like hotcakes.
Yeah, she doesn't care what we think.
No.
Hold on, why have I taken a picture of this page in particular? Oh, yeah, okay, it's this sentence. So I think Lucrezia is like talking to her maid, Sophia. Sophia was listening, leaning in, as if every syllable Lucrezia spoke was a fragile airborne filament of gold to be to be caught, not permitted to float away. I mean, they're not even having that interest in a conversation, so yeah. Now we've pointed out Maggie O'Farrell's, and as soon as I hit that, I was like, I'm gonna take a photo of this to read to Chris. You've got to be able to let that go because she does it all the time. However, writing like that does lend itself to creating really vivid scenery. Mm-hmm. Like, the setting of this book is stunning. Like, I can picture absolutely everything, like the villa or castle or whatever it was. It had turrets, I'm pretty sure it's a castle, that they live in. And if you haven't seen the cover of the UK edition, like, go and look up the cover of the UK edition, because that front cover, I hope they paid that artist the big bucks, because it's amazing. Like, it really captures the book, and that's all from Maggie O'Farrell's descriptions. So where it can be a bit OTT when, she's literally talking about fragments floating around and they're just having a conversation, when it comes to her setting and her scenery, it's really good. And I really loved it. And I think they need to make this into like a TV historical fiction drama. It would be beautiful.
Now, did you read this physically?
Yes.
Okay. We have to talk. Was the UK edition, was the font of it massive or something?
It's pretty big, and they make the margins quite big as well, and then the writing's quite spaced out, and then each chapter had like a what do they call it, a coat of arms at the top of it.
Okay.
So it was just like extravagant.
When you look at the stack of books on the Women's Prize page, the marriage portrait looks equally as long as Demon Copperhead, if not longer. Okay. And when you look at the U.S. edition at a U.S. bookstore, it's hilarious that they could make that edition in the U.K. look so big. It is like the most normal looking. It looks like at max, it's 300 pages in the U.S. Like at max, it's like maybe an inch thick. Like it's just funny to me. And then I feel like the UK keeps doing this because Mercedes just did a video where she was talking about her upcoming summer releases, and she was like, "Oh, I'm really excited because this book it's like 450 pages, like it's one of the longer ones, blah blah blah." And I looked it up in the U.S. because I was like, "Oh, this sounds exciting." The U.S. edition is 320 pages. What are they doing in the U.K. to make their books so long?
I don't know. I think it's because we like a library and to have like big books in our big beautiful books in our library. I don't know.
I don't know, but every time I see the stack of books, I just think it's funny because, like, if you look at I don't know, I just like that. It makes it look insanely long, and it is like half the length of Demon Copperhead.
Is there something in that though, with it made to look like a grandiose big?
Yeah, I think
book.
Because it's historical fiction, I think they kind of wanted it to look like a tome, you know. I think a lot of people who like historical fiction, they want to be swept away in a big sweeping story.
Yeah, and she does that in probably 300 pages.
Yeah.
The book's longer than that, but it's probably 300 pages. I enjoyed it. It's a good one.
Right.
I'd be very surprised if Maggie O'Farrell wins, because I think she has won too recently with too similar a book.
Yeah.
So I don't think she will win.
Now we come to Pod.
I actually made a dolphin noise then.
I just laughed like that.
Oh, God.
Okay. So Pod is by Lailene Paul. Me and Sarah did a whole episode on it. I think it's rubbish. I think it's a really bad book. I don't think anyone should read it. I think the fact that it was shortlisted over contenders like Wandering Souls and Cursed Bread is a indictment of the judging of the Women's Prize. Yeah, it's about a dolphin named Ia, who is a...
I just gotta say, your episode of Sarah, where you said about Ia's name, and is it just the noise that dolphins make? It really made me know. I was like, he might be onto something here.
I literally was wondering, I was like, is it Ia or is it she's a spinner dolphin who cannot hear the music of her people, which means that she cannot participate in the orgiastic ritual of migration and fucking that happens every year. And so she eventually leaves her tribe, where she is swept away by these rifled dolphins who are evil and barbaric and warlike, and there is so much dolphin rape. It is unbelievable. It is a massive amount, more dolphin rape. Probably, if you look at the entire canon of English literature, going back millennia, and counted all the instances of dolphin rape in those books, this book has more than that. Mm-hmm. Okay, in one single volume.
And crusty old dolphin penis.
Yeah, a lot of dolphin penis. The characters make no sense. They're both trying too hard to be too human. It's a mess. I feel like I kind of said my piece on this book when I had that giant episode, but it's not good.
No. Let's just say, go and listen to that episode that you did with Sarah, because you had a really good conversation about it, and I do agree with you. I didn't think it was a good book. I think it's an abomination that this has been shortlisted over Glory. I cannot... Of all the animal books, I cannot believe it.
If they wanted to have an animal, because I didn't finish Glory, okay, so like, I can't speak with a ton of authority on Glory, but like, what I read of Glory was so much more polished, interesting, everything.
Clever,
so if you
funny,
wanted clever,
everything.
Yeah, it was amazing about the Pod book is that the Pod book says almost nothing about environmentalism. Okay, right? It has almost nothing to say about environmentalism. It has everything to say about sexual assault and rape. Okay, like it is a book that's going to talk about it, even though it has nothing particularly interesting to say outside of like, what if dolphins raped? So you get to the author's note in that book, and she starts talking about how she was like inspired to write this, like, for a save the dolphins kind of message, blah blah blah. Well, after reading that book, I suddenly became very anti-dolphin. Like, I think it had the opposite than intended message. Like, I was so confused as to how she possibly thought that's what she was accomplishing with this book. Like, she is just
Yeah.
living in a different planet. I'm sorry, that's no.
I didn't know what this book was about. I didn't know what she wanted it to be about. There is no plot.
There's nothing. It is awful.
It was very strange. And what was I going to say? I thought it was interesting because I didn't listen to your episode until I'd read it, and I assumed she was like a marine biologist or something that knew loads about dolphins, but apparently not. And actually, now that makes sense, because either it was going to be somebody that knows too much about dolphins and therefore is just like throwing everything they know about dolphins into the book, or it's going to be somebody that's done a shit ton of research and throws everything into the book, because there's no plot. It's a lot about dolphins. Whereas Glory, the message behind it is obvious. I didn't know what she was trying to say. Like, was she trying to make commentary on human behavior? Was she actually just talking about dolphins?
It was so bizarre to me, because I kept, at the end of the episode I talked about this. I just felt like if you really wanted to have a conversation about like sexual assault, okay, and humans and patriarchy, blah blah blah, just talk about humans. This dolphin thing is adding absolutely nothing other than just a lot of water imagery and sounds and like just relentless dolphin fucking, like an unbelievable amount of dolphin fucking. And yeah, truly amazing to me.
Yeah.
Was not a fan. When I first started reading this book, I actually liked like maybe the first 10 pages.
Me
And I realized that like, oh, it's about spinner dolphins. So let me go online and watch a little thing about spinner dolphins. So to get an idea of what these things look like, how they behave, etc. And I watched a like 15-minute YouTube video that was exploring the grandeur of these dolphins, okay? And I was like, oh my god, these are the most beautiful, amazing, complex creatures in the entire world. I am so excited to read this book. And then I went and read this book, and she took all of that grandeur, all of what could have been so interesting, and just took a gigantic heaping shit on all of it. And it was just like, nope, actually, we're not doing any of that. Psych, you thought. Spinner dolphins, nope. Strap in. We're getting fucked. That was the whole book.
Yeah, I didn't know what the point was. There's probably not much point in talking about it anymore. Cause
yeah. We've
neither of us enjoyed it.
No.
Sarah did. So if you...
Britta Bowler enjoyed it. I know she enjoyed it too. And I respect Britta's opinions, and I think she's very smart, and so clearly it's doing something for some people.
And so did Lena Norms.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she had it as her winner. So go and watch some people that actually enjoyed it, because we're probably being unfair, maybe.
Yeah. I actually don't think I'm being unfair, but it's okay.
I don't. But the main thing that annoys me the most is that I cannot believe they had 2 animal books on there. I cannot believe, and I want to know why this was shortlisted over Glory. I do not understand it, because I don't see what it had to say. Like, what it had to say, if it was trying to make commentary on the human world, was so on the nose.
Unbelievably on the nose.
I don't know if she was being sincere or not. Moving on. Last one, Chris.
Trespasses by Louise Kennedy. Okay. I have actually not finished this one. I'm almost finished with it. I'm going to finish it today, but I have to say I'm loving it. It's set in the Troubles, and it's following a young woman named Kushla. She's 24 years old. She's a teacher by day for, I think, like 8-year-olds. They call it P3 or something. I can't remember. But yeah, she's 8-year-olds. And by night, she is a bartender for her family's bar. And it's here that she meets Michael Agnew, who is an older man. He's Protestant. She's Catholic. And she strikes up kind of this illicit affair with him because he's married. And also, obviously, the people in her life do not want her dating a Protestant, because it would just spell nothing but trouble for them. And the book is this really intense examination of this relationship, of what it means to find lust and love and do all the normal human things, taking care of children, all this different stuff, in the middle of what feels like a completely absurd and horrifying civil war. I am somebody who does not know much about the Troubles because I'm an ignorant American who that was not taught in our education system at all. And I took like AP European history and stuff like that, and never once did the Troubles get mentioned. And so I know very little about the Troubles, and I have found previous attempts to read novels set in the Troubles very confusing to understand and navigate, including, for example, the book that won the Booker Prize had the word milk in it. Milkman, thank you, by Anna Burns, which had a really impressive writing style, but which just confounded me because I was so confused by the conflict. And it's one that I would maybe like to return to after researching more. This book, yes, there are points that confuse me. There are points where I'm wondering, why are English soldiers involved? Like all this different stuff. I'm like, what the hell? But it's so much more focused on the kind of intimate details of these people's lives and that kind of strange feeling of living your everyday life while all these just intense atrocities are happening. So kind of every day when she opens up the school for her kids, she asks the kids to say something that they saw on the news to keep them like well informed. And the kids are talking about bodies being discovered, murders, car bombs, all these really horrific things. But then every day on the news, there's also a human interest story where they like interview people on the streets about like their opinions about things that are not political or anything like that. So like on the very first chapter, the human interest story was streaking. What was your opinion of streaking? Okay. And all these people, oh, it's obscene. Oh, I think I would do it if it was, won't get caught, all this different stuff. And all these people kind of having this laugh. And she goes to school the next day and asks the children for, their news stories. And, oh, bomb, this, that, and the other thing. And then the kids are like, oh, but there was something about streaking on the news too. And they're talking about, so it's just like this joy, this humor in the midst of all this insanity. And kind of the main driver of the plot, besides this love affair, is that one of her students' father, who's in a mixed marriage, is brutally beaten with an inch of his life and found on the side of the road by, I think, the IRA. And it's just really upsetting, and that has consequences for their lives as well. So I really love it. I think it's very impressive, and in fact, if either this or Demon Copperhead won, I would be very pleased. It's up there with Demon Copperhead as far as like the enjoyment. I think I like the writing style more. She's a beautiful writer.
Interesting. This isn't a debut, is it?
It is. It is a debut.
Is it?
It is.
I should have looked up which ones were debuts and which ones weren't.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading this one. I was saying to Chris before we started recording that I didn't want to start rushing to listen to it just to be involved in this conversation because I want to allow the time to read it properly. So we weren't taught much about the Troubles in school either, Chris, and it, it's obviously a conflict very, very close to home. So I'm not surprised you didn't learn about it, but it's shocking that we didn't learn more about it in school. It's a conflict in recent times during my lifetime. Bombs were going off in London. I remember it being on the news. So it's shocking that we didn't learn more about it in school. So I do like to read books about the Troubles because it is so close to home that it just feels like something we should know about. Like the repercussions of the Troubles still goes on today. So I'm really looking forward to it. And it's interesting that this one and Black Butterflies got shortlisted.
I was going to say the same exact thing, because when you were describing Black Butterflies, I was like, that sounds like it's in very close conversation with Trespasses. And something I find really interesting about Trespasses is that there's kind of commentary later on in the book about basically the fact that like a lot of the people that come to the bar and stuff like that, they'll like kind of sit and reminisce about World War II. Some of the older people and the Blitz, blah, 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 blah. And yet none of them can really talk about the current war, okay? Because, like, it's too unspeakable to think of, like, this civil war and the enemies being, like, so close at hand and all this different stuff. And it's really interesting commentary that they can almost find this comfort and safety of talking about the trauma of World War One because it's at least, or World War Two, because it's at least something that can bind them all together.
Mm.
It's really, really powerful. I love it. I'm really loving it.
Yeah. Interesting. Because you saying that this one winning or Demon Copperhead winning and you'd be happy. I'm the same with Black Butterflies and Demon Copperhead. That if either of those two win, like Demon Copperhead, I don't particularly want it to win actually, because I don't know, it's good, but I don't think she needs to win.
Yeah.
I won't be surprised if it does, but if Black Butterflies wins, I won't be disappointed. I'll be happy if it did.
And if Pod wins, I'm going to stage a one-man protest at the Women's Prize for Fiction headquarters in London because I will be there that week.
Oh yeah, you'll be there.
I will be out there with signs.
You can get out of your concert and you can storm the stage.
I will not stand for this. Have a Kanye moment with Taylor Swift. I'm going to let you finish.
So, your winner, Demon Copperhead or Trespassers?
I mean, it's difficult for me to say Trespassers now because I haven't finished it, so let's say Demon Copperhead's my winner.
Okay. I think Demon Copperhead will win, but Black Butterflies is my winner.
My true winner is Cursed Bread.
That is one I want to read.
It's not there, unfortunately. I really loved it. I really loved Cursed Bread. I think it's a shame that she didn't make it.
Yeah, there's probably a few on that long list. It's a shame. Didn't make it. I mean, we're going to wrap up soon, but why do you think these books made the shortlist?
They all do straddle that line between commercial and literary. I think that is something that's really important for the Women's Prize. It seems to be their brand, for example, look at authors that have made it one year and maybe not the next year, right? So like Ayobami Adebayo, I really expected that she was going to make the long list this year because her book Stay With Me was such a huge Women's Prize buzz in 2016. So I thought A Spell for Good Things was just like automatically going to be there. And it didn't make it. And I've not personally read Spell for Good Things yet, but from every review I've heard about it, it is much more literary, much more slow, and maybe a lot less accessible than Stay With Me was. And so I think that these books blend that kind of accessible with serious literary credibility, whereas maybe prizes like the Booker are not necessarily as interested in that accessibility portion.
Yeah, agreed. I think the Women's Prize likes to, I don't know, I think they like to give the big hitters a slot. So I knew that Maggie O'Farrell and Barbara Kingsolver would be there. And then I do think they like and rightly so, they like their sort of current issues in today's society being portrayed in, like you say, an accessible way. So Black Butterflies, I think because of the refugee crisis and the war in Ukraine, it's a very accessible way, not that the right people are going to read it, let's face it, of portraying why somebody would be trying to flee their own country and make their way to the UK. I still don't understand Pod. I don't know whether it's because they do feel that it's trying to talk about the patriarchy and all that kind of stuff. If it is, it's heavy-handed.
Yeah, I will say the one, I don't know if I would say like criticism, but something I've noticed about the Women's Prize over the years, and I would maybe like to see them get a little bit better about this, is that they tend to have, you can almost always count that they're going to have a book from India, they're going to have a book from Africa, a lot of places where like Britain has colonized, okay? They tend to have like blah, blah, blah. But then the rate of those books getting shortlisted is just a lot lower. Like they make the long list and then they just do not tend to make the short list. And so I would like to see them widen, more countries outside the UK than just India and Nigeria. You know what I'm saying? Like it seems to be like those tend to be a lot of the main countries of focus. And I would like to see those books actually making the short list.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think it was in the episode that we recorded with Sean where we also said about the women's prize. They can feel like they're ticking boxes, particularly in terms of transgender authors.
Yeah,
I don't think there was
been
any
very few.
transgender authors longlisted this year.
Yeah, there were none. And then I know that there's definitely been some friction from non-binary authors as to whether or not they feel safe or eligible in the category. I think it's Akweki Emeze. They decided that they weren't going to have their books submitted to the Women's Prize any longer after how their last inclusion was handled.
And I know when we did that previous episode, we looked on the website to see what their kind of statement around including non-binary and well, there isn't really anything there.
No.
So
and it's disappointing because unfortunately in England the transgender topic is just so much more contentious, I would say, than even in the United States, where it's certainly contentious enough. But it's very frightening, I think, how much credibility TERFs have in the UK literary scene. I feel like every week a new UK author I thought was fine comes out as a TERF. Comes out as a TERF on Twitter. And so it would be nice to see a prize like the Women's Prize kind of take a stand as part of the literary establishment against what I think is a very frightening pseudo-academic movement.
Yes, I wish they'd put their money where their mouths is, rather than just doing what feels like a tick box exercise. That'll be my ongoing criticism of the Women's Prize until they sort it out.
Yes. But that was the Women's Prize, and we'll see. We'll see what happens on the 14th.
On the 14th.
I don't know when this episode's going live, but the 14th is
if
when we will
I can get it done, it'll be
out.
going up in the next couple of days.
Oh,
so
you're an angel.
Come out in time. But yes, thank you for listening. As always, you can get in touch with us with any questions, ideas, or feedback by email. We're with the Bookcast Club at outlook.com. On Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, we are at Bookcast Club. You can sign up to our newsletter on Substack for more reviews, new releases, podcast recommendations, and updates on this podcast. And you can check out our Patreon, where you can now have a 7-day free trial of our bonus tier. And we will be back very soon. Thank you for listening.
All right. Bye.